What's going on, YouTube? Today I'm going to be going over my top books from 2024. So when I think about the books that I read last year, I'm pretty sure I read 16 books, and I feel like I enjoyed all of them, more or less. Some more than others, of course. That's why we have some favorites. A few of those books that come to mind are Short Stay in Hell by Stephen L. Peck and Blindness by Jose Saramago. Another one of my favorite books from last year was The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead as well. So first, let's start off with A Short Stay in Hell. So I think I got this recommendation off of Reddit, I believe. And then I've started to see it more on Book Talk as well. But it's a very short book. I know what you're thinking. Why would I want to read a short book when there's so many good long books out there? Like Game of Thrones and Crime and Punishment. Well, you see, with this book, I feel like it has all that storytelling that you get out of maybe like a 400, 500, 600 page book compacted down into 150 pages. And it's a book I thought about since I read it back in, I believe, August. Um, this book is basically about a guy who dies and he gets sent to hell, but his version of hell is, I believe it's kind of akin to the Library of Babel, where you're in this infinite library, and there's other people there too as well, but you're in this infinite library in the afterlife where it has every conceivable book imaginable and then some. So it could be a 400 page book with solely the letter A, or it could be a 400 page book that could be a recreation of Harry Potter, except for maybe one letter is missing. And every permutation of that conceivable. It's basically infinite. Technically, it's not, but it basically is to our comprehension standards. This book was so vivid, and when I think about it now, I really feel like I can place myself there, if that makes sense. Like, I know a lot of the books, they may be detailed well where you can kind of envision it as a movie, and this was that, and then some. I feel like the storytelling in it was very good. And you really felt for all the characters. Like I said, it's not just the main character who gets sent here, but it's probably billions, if not trillions, of people scattered around this library. In this version of hell, I believe the religion that it's for is Zoroastrianism. But this book was intense. I feel like this book has a little bit of everything. I feel like it has that existentialism that you're probably thinking of when you think of a book like this. It also has a bit of romance, a bit of philosophy, of course, religion, but not that much, if I remember correctly. But this book, I feel like it really made me think of what the afterlife holds for myself, my family, my friends. It made me really want to be a better person. You know what I mean? Because if there is an afterlife, I want to make sure I'm not going to hell, especially this place. This book was terrifying, and it still kind of horrifies me now just to think about the concept of this. And I forgot to mention that, and all this gets explained pretty early on in the book. But I forgot to mention that the only way to get out of hell and basically get out of hell is you have to find the book with your life story to a T without a detail missing. And like I said, this library is infinite. It has every book imaginable. They spend the first part like talking about how people are really just looking around for any semblance of word structure, because most of the books that they're looking at, it's just a jumble of letters, numbers, that kind of thing. This book was so scary, and there's so many moments in this book, given how short it is too, that really make you kind of like reel back, like, oh my gosh, like that really just happened. You know what I mean? So it's like it still baffles me how short this book was. But yeah, so that was definitely one of the best books I've read. I've recommended it to quite a few people. I hope some of those people get a chance to read it so we can talk about it. But yeah, no, this book was really good. The second book that I read last year that was one of my favorites was Blindness by Jose Saramago. And this isn't a book I really hear talked about that much. Whether that be, like, I've seen it online a little bit. Like, I feel like I get a lot of my recommendations from Reddit. So I've seen it there a little bit. But outside of that, I don't really hear people talking about this book really at all. Like, I don't think anybody that I talk to that really reads has mentioned it to me before, and I feel like a lot of people don't really know what it is. I believe it came out in the late 90s, and there's also a movie based on it too. I haven't seen the movie, but this book is basically, long story short, is everybody in the world goes blind, just like basically because of a pandemic, except for one woman. And just the story unfolds from there. And the story is centered around, I'd say, like 6 characters, I believe. So that woman, her husband, and a few other people. And then they're in this unnamed city and this unnamed country. There's not really a lot of details given that will lead you to figuring out where this is, because that's not what it's about. It's not about where this is. It's more about what's going on, what people do in these kind of circumstances. This book made me really think a lot about COVID too, and that pandemic. It was kind of eerie, especially given how long ago this book came out. Um, this book was also terrifying, but in a different way, just in terms of like what people will do when their life is upended, things change. It's basically like an apocalypse. You know what I mean? So the book starts out with everybody going blind, and it's gradual, but it ramps up with speed, and it's kind of contagious. I guess that's one way to put it. And it starts out with these group of characters, including the woman who can see. They get sent to a camp because like the government is trying to isolate the people that are blind because they're starting to figure out that it is contagious. And the story just unfolds from there, where they're in this like kind of like camp prison compound thing with other people that are blind, and as people become blind, they get sent here. And like I said, like the one of the main characters, the woman, she can see, so she's just trying to figure out, okay, like what's going on. Obviously, there's questions about like why maybe she didn't turn blind, but she uses her ability to still see to kind of help her husband, help the other characters in the book, and just things unfolded there. This book made me really think about the Stanford prison experiment as well, just like what people do when they get in situations like this, where they're in enclosed spaces, they're with people they've never met before, and what they'll do for survival, what they'll do for their families, their children, their spouses. You know what I mean? I feel like sometimes when I think about this book, I'm at a loss of words, just because this book was also very vivid in terms of the storytelling, and really putting you in the shoes of these blind people. And it had me questioning throughout the entire time, like, what would I do if I was in this situation? Like, what would you do if one day you were just walking, you were driving to maybe go get some groceries, and all of a sudden you just turned blind? Like, that is a terrifying concept. And I feel like it's easy for us to say when we read these type of things, to be like, oh, like I'd do better. I wouldn't harm others or fight for my survival in the ways that these people do in this kind of literature. But when it really comes down to it, like, you're going to do what you need to do in order for you to make it to the next day. And I feel like this book really emphasizes that. And I think that's one of the biggest themes, and just how people take advantage of that power of other people not being able to see. You know what I mean? So, I listened to the audio book of this, and I listened to it while I was just like walking around, and it made me very aware of my eyesight. Really appreciate that, and I honestly still think about it. And especially after reading this book, I'm terrified of becoming blind. I feel like that's just a scary concept. Obviously, I would hope it wouldn't be in this kind of situation where everybody's blind, but just the idea of having the luxury of sight, and that just being one of the most important senses, and not having it, like, that is just, oh, it just gets me. You know what I mean? So I feel like this book really instilled a gigantic fear of being blind. So the other favorite that I had from last year was The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. So I believe this won the Pulitzer in fiction a few years ago. And I have a bucket list of trying to read all the Pulitzer Prize winning books. It might take me a lifetime, but it is a bucket list thing. So, but this book is basically about the Underground Railroad from just slave times. And you have our main character, and she's on a plantation, and she decides to escape. Just seeing what her situation is, she feels like that is her best option. and it goes into detail on like what made her make this decision or why she came to this eventually, kind of thing. But the big thing about this book is there's a bit of like magical realism, I guess, or maybe just kind of like extended fiction. Like, I can't think of the best word, but instead of the Underground Railroad being like a kind of like a figurative thing, in this it's an actual thing. So there's like an underground railroad that is ran by conductors and ran by people. So just like in reality, you had houses and places where people could hide out, and families that would hide you in their house or let you know where to go next, kind of thing. Except for this, they're doing the same thing, but there's actual entrances to an underground railroad system that expands throughout the eastern part of the country, to help people get to where they're trying to go and get out of the slave states. So this book I really enjoyed because I feel like it really showed how racism and slavery was different throughout the country in the U.S. I feel like it's easy for us to think about slavery being like, oh, Louisiana or Georgia plantations that were these horrid things, and everything about slavery is horrible and that kind of thing. But slavery and the treatment of black people throughout the country was different during that time. Black people were treated, slaved or not, were treated differently in Louisiana versus New York and maybe North Carolina and Indiana, kind of thing. So as she's traveling around the country, escaping what it is to be bounty hunters, basically, that are trying to get her and bring her back to her original plantation, she goes to these different states, gets off these Underground Railroad stops, and she really experiences what it's like to be a black person during this time, no matter where you are, and how that mistreatment sometimes may be in front of you, or sometimes it may be more subliminal, where it isn't right in your face, but you still feel it. You still feel it in the actions and the feelings of those around you, and just how that world is built, So I feel like this was it felt very real, if that makes sense. If I read this book and I knew nothing about slavery, I feel like I would think this book was not fiction, if that makes sense. Just the level of detail that Colson Whitehead goes through, and the attention he gives his stories, especially those that are in the past. And I've read another one of his books that I really enjoyed as well. I feel like that's a testament to his writing ability. This book was very captivating, and I would highly recommend it. So those are my favorite books. Some honorable mentions. I'd say My Dark Vanessa. I also listened to the audiobook for that. That book was really good. Another honorable mention goes to The Silent Patient, which I read, I think, in like less than 24 or 36 hours. That book was so good. Very fast paced, and you kind of just want to know what happens next. I feel like that's also a very popular book. And then I also read a Riley Sager book, The House Across the Lake, which I really enjoyed. I've read 2 of his books now, and he started to become one of my favorite authors, I kind of think. So definitely want to read more of his books this year. But so that is those are my favorite books from 2024, and I appreciate you guys watching. Let me know what your favorites were from 2024 down in the comments, and thank you.